All right, so let's dive into this whole hacker mindset thing. You sent over some fascinating articles on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it really fascinating how it goes way beyond just cybersecurity, you know?
Yeah, definitely. It's more about problem solving and just how we think in general. I thought that article by Roy Sherman was really interesting.
Oh, yeah. Cultivating a hacker mindset in cybersecurity defense, in dark reading.
Yeah, that's when he had some really interesting points about how, like, our traditional check the box approach to security is failing. Like, we're not really keeping up.
Yeah, and he really highlights how attackers are always like evolving and thinking outside the box, while so many security professionals get stuck in that reactive mindset, just checking off compliance requirements and not really thinking strategically.
It's almost like attackers are playing chess.
And the defenders are stuck playing checkers.
Exactly. And then he brings up that SolarWinds breach
Yeah, that's a perfect
as like a
nice.
prime example of how this can go wrong.
Yeah, they exploited that trusted automated process, and that's the kind of thing that traditional security measures just miss. They don't even think about it.
Right. They're not looking in the bigger picture, and it's like a wake-up call to start thinking more like an attacker
Absolutely. Like, we need to understand their motivation,
and anticipate their moves.
predict what they're going to do next. And that's where this whole path of least resistance idea comes in, right? Attackers are always going to go for the easiest way to get what they want.
Yeah, they're not going to try to brute force their way in if there's an easier vulnerability to exploit.
Exactly. And that's especially true now with everyone moving to the cloud.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of the cloud, you mentioned cloud misconfigurations earlier.
Mhm.
Like, how do those become such easy targets?
Well, it's pretty simple, really. Like, imagine a company has a ton of sensitive data stored in a cloud storage bucket,
Okay, I'm following.
but they mess up the access controls.
So it's just out there for anyone to grab.
Anyone on the internet could just download it all without any hacking skills at all.
Right. Wow, so it's like leaving your front door wide open and then wondering why you got robbed.
It's exactly like that. And that's why we need to shift from reacting all the time to being more proactive and thinking ahead like a hacker would.
So this hacker mindset we're talking about, it's not about, wearing hoodies in the dark and writing malicious code.
Right,
It's
exactly.
a way of thinking.
A kind of curiosity about how things really work and a willingness to question everything.
So how would you break down like the core elements of a hacker mindset?
Hmm. I'd say it starts with deep curiosity, just this desire to really understand how systems work, like inside and out.
Not just knowing how to use something, but like how it actually works on a fundamental level.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it also involves a healthy dose of skepticism, questioning all the assumptions, testing the boundaries, always looking for different ways to do things.
So you're not just taking things at face value, you're poking and prodding.
Exactly. And the third thing I'd say is that you have to embrace failure as an opportunity to learn.
Yeah, that's something we don't do enough in a lot of fields.
Yeah. In hacking, though, failure is part of the process.
You learn from your mistakes,
Yeah.
you try again and again, you keep iterating and improving.
Yeah, it's a constant cycle of experimentation.
And this is making me think about how we get stuck in routine so easily.
Mm.
In this hacker mindset, it encourages a much more flexible approach.
Yeah, it does. And that actually reminds me of that second article you sent, Hacker Mindset to be Successful at Anything.
Oh yeah, by Ugur Yagmor.
Yeah, he was talking about how you can apply this mindset to anything, even something like machine learning.
Yeah, that was really interesting. How does that work?
Well, he uses the example of a machine learning algorithm.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to understand all the complex math behind it at first.
Right.
You can start by just figuring out what you put into it and what comes out, and then playing around with the inputs and seeing how it affects the results.
So you're breaking down a really complex problem into smaller, more manageable experiments.
Exactly. And that reminds me of something from the Sherman article. He called it the Jack Attack test.
Oh yeah, I remember that. It's like giving someone a challenge, like how to turn off the light and seeing how many ways they come up with to do it.
Exactly. It's not about finding the one right answer. It's about exploring all the possibilities, thinking outside the box and challenging the conventional way of doing things.
So someone with a good hacker mindset might try unscrewing the bulb, cutting the power cord, or even using a voice command if it's a smart light.
Exactly. And it's a brilliant way to see how someone approaches problem solving and how creative they can be.
Yeah, and it seems like this kind of thinking, it could be used in so many areas, not just technology.
Absolutely anything, really. Marketing, music, whatever. If you're trying to reach a new audience or come up with a new sound, this hacker mindset can help you break free from the usual way of doing things.
This has already been so interesting.
And we haven't even gotten to Karen Elazari's article yet.
I know. I'm excited to dig into that one. But before we do, I'm curious, What stood out to you the most so far about this whole hacker mindset idea?
Well, I think it's the emphasis on being curious, being able to adapt and never stop learning. Those are the things that really resonate with me.
Yeah, it's a reminder to never stop questioning and experimenting, no matter what you're doing in life.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really inspiring to see how much this resonates with you. And you're right, that whole idea of continuous learning and exploring, that's really at the heart of this hacker mindset. Now, before we jump into Karen Elazari's article, I wanted to touch on something else about cybersecurity. We talked a little bit about attacker motivations earlier, but I think it's really important to dig into that a bit more.
Yeah, why is understanding the why behind attacks so crucial?
Well, think of it this way. If we only focus on the how, like the specific tools and techniques they're using, we're always going to be playing catch up, right?
Right, like we're just reacting to what they've already done.
Exactly. But if we understand the why, their goals, what they're really after, then we can start to anticipate their actions and build better defenses.
Okay, so instead of just patching vulnerabilities after they've been exploited, we can try to predict what they're going to target next.
Precisely. And this goes back to the hacker mindset because it forces us to really step into the attacker's shoes and think the way they think.
Oh, that reminds me of something from the Sherman article. He talked about red team exercises, I think.
Yes, red teaming is a great example of this.
Can you explain what that is for our listeners who might not be familiar?
Sure. So basically, it's like a simulated attack where a team of security experts, the red team, acts like real hackers.
So they try to break into the organization's systems.
Exactly. They're trying to find vulnerabilities before the real bad guys do.
So it's like a controlled experiment to test how strong their security really is.
Precisely. And the key is that they don't just attack randomly. They use the same tactics and techniques that real-world attackers use.
So it's not just a theoretical exercise. It's a very practical way to see how things would actually play out.
Yeah, and it's not just about finding the vulnerabilities, it's about understanding how the attackers think their motivations, what they're going to go after first.
It must be really eye-opening for the defending team to see how these attackers operate.
It absolutely is, and it often highlights the importance of the human factor in all of this.
Yeah, right, because even with all the fancy technology, humans are still often the weakest link.
Exactly. Attackers know this, and they use things like social engineering, phishing emails, even just simple trickery to bypass all the technical defenses.
Like that old saying, a fool with a tool is still a fool.
Uh-huh, exactly. So things like security awareness training and creating a culture of vigilance, those are just as important as having the latest firewalls and intrusion detection systems.
So the hacker mindset isn't just about technical skills.
Yeah.
It's also about understanding human behavior and psychology, even a little bit of deception.
Absolutely. And that brings us perfectly to Karen Elazari's perspective, which I know you were excited to talk about. Her article in HelpNet Security really emphasizes this broader application of the hacker mindset.
Yeah. Thinking outside the code. How the hacker mindset drives innovation. That was a really interesting take.
She's a big advocate for bug bounty programs.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those. What are those exactly?
It's basically where organizations invite ethical hackers to find and report vulnerabilities in their systems.
And they get rewarded for it.
Exactly. It's a way to leverage the skills and knowledge of the hacker community to actually improve security.
So you're kind of crowdsourcing security testing. You're tapping into this huge pool of talent.
Exactly. And it's incredibly effective because these ethical hackers, they come at it from a different angle than the internal security teams often find things that were missed.
Right, they're not as close to the problem so they can see it with fresh eyes.
And they do it in a controlled, responsible way, so it's a win-win for everyone.
The company gets valuable insights, and the hackers get recognition and rewards.
Exactly. But Elazari goes even further than just bug bounties. She sees this whole hacker mindset as a driver of innovation, not just in cybersecurity, but everywhere. She argues that the same qualities that make a great hacker, that curiosity, that willingness to experiment and being okay with failure, those are the same things that drive innovation in any field.
So it's about taking that same approach to problem solving and applying it to other challenges.
Precisely. And she also talks about the importance of fostering this mindset in education.
Oh, yeah, I remember that she thinks we should be encouraging kids to experiment more, to tinker with things, break things.
In a safe and controlled way, of course.
Of course, but yeah, to learn from their mistakes.
It's about moving away from rote memorization and towards a more hands-on experiential approach to learning.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we were saying about the core of the hacker mindset, the passion for learning, the willingness to challenge the status quo, the belief that there's always a better way to do things.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here talking about this whole hacker mindset and how it's not just about cybersecurity. It's really about how we learn and approach problems in any field.
Yeah, exactly. And you hit the nail on the head earlier. It's less about specific skills and more about way of thinking, like a philosophy for tackling challenges.
I'm curious, though, what are some practical things people can do to actually start developing this mindset? I mean, it all sounds great in theory, but it's still a bit abstract for me.
Well, one thing you can start doing right now is just asking why more often.
Why?
Yeah, don't just take things at face value, dig a little deeper.
So, like, instead of just following instructions blindly or going through the motions, stop and think about why things are done that way.
Exactly. Ask yourself, why is this process set up like this? Or why did they choose this solution instead of something else?
You might be surprised at what you find.
You definitely will, and you'll learn a lot along the way.
It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with understanding the why behind a cyber attack. It gives you a much deeper understanding and helps you predict what might happen next.
Exactly, and this applies to anything you're learning or trying to get better at. Don't just focus on the how-to, really try to understand the reasons behind it, the principles at play.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about being curious and not just scratching the surface.
Right, and another big part of this is embracing lifelong learning. The world is changing so fast, technology especially, and there's always something new to discover.
So don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. Take some courses, go to workshops, read books, anything that expands your knowledge and keeps you learning.
Exactly, and don't limit yourself to just your own field.
Yeah.
Explore related areas, even things that seem totally unrelated at first.
That reminds me of what Elazari said about encouraging a hacker mindset in education.
Mm.
Encouraging kids to experiment, tinker with things, break things.
Safely, of course.
Of course, but to learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, it's about shifting from being afraid of failure to seeing it as a chance to learn and get better.
So it's not just about acquiring more knowledge, it's about developing a mindset that's all about continuous learning and experimentation.
Exactly. And along with that comes adaptability, being able to adjust to new situations, think on your feet, and find creative solutions when things don't go according to plan.
It seems like this hacker mindset is all about embracing uncertainty and seeing those unexpected challenges as opportunities.
I love that that's a great way to put it. It's about having that drive to explore, to experiment, to constantly push the boundaries of what's possible.
Wow, this has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've gone from cybersecurity to problem solving to education, all through this lens of the hacker mindset.
It has been a fascinating journey, and I think the key takeaway here is that this mindset isn't just for techies or security professionals. It's something that can benefit anyone in any field.
Absolutely. It's about cultivating that curiosity, that willingness to challenge assumptions, and that resilience to keep learning and growing no matter what obstacles you face.
If there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's that the hacker mindset isn't about breaking into systems or writing malicious code. It's about embracing a spirit of inquiry, a love of learning, and a passion for pushing the limits of what we know and what we can achieve.
I love that. It's a mindset that empowers us to be more creative, more adaptable, and better problem solvers in all aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I encourage everyone listening to embrace their inner hacker. Never stop questioning, experimenting, and exploring the world around you.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
The pleasure was all mine. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep hacking your way to success.